Welcome to the DSO Imager channel. This is James, and this is part 2 of my processing of the Elephant Trunk Nebula. If you haven't seen uh, version 1, part 1, please check it out. That covers everything that I did prior to stretching the image. In part 2, we're going to go over everything else. So this image is stretched, but it needs some work. So the first thing I'm going to do here is we're going to remove the stars. And we're going to use StarNet for that. Now I know that currently if you're running on a Mac, the StarNet in pixinisight isn't working properly currently, but you can still get StarNet as a standalone and run it against your image. If you're using something other than pixinisight, you can still use the standalone StarNet to pull the stars out and then do all your work in Photoshop or whatever other editing software you're using. And while I'm using pixinisight, a lot of the concepts you can do in other editing programs. So while this video is probably most helpful for those that are trying to learn their way around pixinisight, the concepts are still apply outside of pixinisight. Alright, so let's go ahead and apply this. Okay, so StarNet just finished. And this is going to allow us to process them separately. So we're going to take our stars and we're just going to set them off. Now I just want to say everything from here on out, this is all personal taste. So if I start talking about getting rid of Magenta or whatever, that's just how I'm working at it. If you like Magenta, there's no reason you have to get rid of it. I mean, there's a lot of people get rid of all their green in Hubble palette images, but I like a little green sitting around. So it's all personal preference. So the main thing is not to pay too close attention to my personal choices on what I'm doing with the colors, just focus on how I'm doing it. So first thing that I'm going to want to do is get rid of this purplish magenta hue. I don't want to get rid of all of it, but I want to get rid of most of it. And so what I'm going to do is invert this image. And notice that all the magenta areas are now green. So what do we use to get rid of green? It is the SCNR tool. Now I'm not going to get rid of all of it because when you get rid of the magenta by removing green, you get left this kind of yellowish color. So I don't want too much of that. So I'm going to dial this back to around 80% or so. And that did what I wanted. Next, we're going to pull out curves. And we're going to want to just darken the shadows a little bit. Oops, get the preview going. Darken the shadows a little bit and improve the highlights and give it a couple shots of that. Now, one thing that you have to be careful about is as you're doing stuff like this, areas that are already dark on your image, like these corners here, they'll get extremely dark. So sometimes what you want to do is actually mask them off to prevent these corners from getting any darker than they already are. And we actually have a range mask that might work. Let's see. This is from our deconvolution. And that might be okay. That might actually be a little bit too strong. Let's go make a new mask. Alright, let's see if this works for us. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let me take the mask off. And you'll have to forgive me, but this is kind of how I do it. I just kind of bounce back and forth. I want to brighten this up a little bit first. Now let's put that mask on. I'm going to remove the mask because I actually want this area to get darkened up a bit. Although, you see how you got this dust here showing up against this background? I want to maintain that. So I don't want the background to get as dark as this here. And by clicking on this and then looking at the histogram, you can see where it's at. So there's not a lot there. Now, should we do something about the green? Yeah, let's remove a little bit. It is really strong. Maybe 50%? Yeah, I think that's okay. We'll get some of it back when we boost saturation. How's that? Too much? I mean, some people like really colorful, overly saturated images. Other people like it very pale. I tend to be somewhere in the between. Let's see, is that mask still on there? No, it's not. I actually want these areas to get a little bit darker, so let's darken them up. Oops. I mean, we didn't really do a whole lot. I mean, it didn't take much to get here. Now, let me show you another trick. If you don't like this yellow, you want to get rid of some of that. We can kind of turn it almost red. So we can invert this image again. And now we can see it's blue. Well, we can use SCNR to remove blue. We don't want to do too much, though. If you do too much, you end up with magenta, which is something that we already got rid of. So let's just do 30%. There we go. Now we got kind of a orange reddish color here. We want to pull back on the green some more, just a little bit. There we go. Strengthen the blue in the center. How about that? Too much? So, I mean, you know, this is one of those things where you can just kind of tinker with the image all day long. So I think we're gonna call it good here. I don't know. Let me try one more thing here. I want to bring this out a little bit more. So this area we want to brighten, and this area we want to dark. So we'll just grab it down here. There. Now you can get really creative by doing more range masks or color masks and section off different areas and really play around with the curves. I mean, see these little Bach globules in here? We can pull these out even more, but I think we did a pretty good job of getting that stuff out. Yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. Maybe brighten the image a little bit more. Alright. Alright, I'm going to call this done. Like I said, we can tinker with this all day long. I'm going to make a copy of it, and I'm going to rename it Starless. Now let's go to our star mask. So lots of magenta stars here, which is pretty typical with Hubble palette. There is a script. It basically does the same thing as inverting, subtracting green, and inverting back. And it's called correct magenta stars. We're going to run it against our star mask, and I'm going to max it out. And there we go. I mean, that did pretty good. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and get rid of the green. I like green, but I don't like green in my stars. Alright. Now, I'm going to pull back just a little bit. You don't want to go back too much because you'll end up with those dark rings around your stars. And we're going to boost saturation. Let's see what color is in there. Give it another shot. We'll give it another shot. Alright. And it's a lot of orange, some blue. I'm going to pull back on red a little bit to weaken the orange. And I may increase the blue just a little bit. Basically what I'm looking for is a nice distribution of color in the stars. I mean, it's not RGB stars. That would be the best. I don't have the RGB stars for this, so we're going to go with this. Alright, so let's combine these, see what we get. So we're just going to open up Pixel Math. If I can click on it. Expression editor, we want Starless plus Star Mask 1. And we're going to create new image, color space is RGB, hit the square, and there we go. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. Now, I'm not an advanced pixinisight user. I'm pretty much an intermediate user, and there's many different ways to accomplish similar tasks, and there are more advanced things that you can do, and there are different processes that you can do, but at a basic level, I mean, this is it. And I think it turned out a pretty decent image. Now, if you saw my video on the Pickering's triangle, you know near the end I mentioned waiting or sitting on your image for a night because you'll start to see things that you could do differently. And as I'm looking at this, I actually am not too crazy about the color in these corners down here, and I think what I would do is use a range mask and desaturate that area. Why don't we do that real quick? Is that our mask? Yeah. I'll show you how to do that. And it's super easy. And it is a technique that I have been doing for quite some time. So go to saturation, and we're just going to pull it back. Look at that. Yeah, that looks better, doesn't it? I don't want to go too much. Let's go back to pixel math real quick. There. How does that look? That looks better. Not a huge difference, but a little bit cleaner, I think. So anyway, as I was saying, there's not really that much going on here. pixinisight has a reputation for having a high learning curve. And it does have a learning curve. I think it's more difficult if you're already used to something else like Photoshop and then try to move over to pixinisight. For me, I didn't have a Photoshop background, and pixinisight was actually easier for me to pick up than Photoshop. Let's see how this looks compared to my first version. Pretty similar. You can see I spent a little bit more time on this one playing around with curves, but it's actually very similar results. So if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and please subscribe. There's more of this on its way. Pretty much almost every image that I take is going to have an accompanying video, and I'll mix it up. Some videos will just be the workflow like what you've seen. Some of them will be this processing. Some of them will just simply be showcasing the image. If anyone has any questions, suggestions, ideas, please put them in those comments, and I look forward to getting the next one out for you guys. Clear skies.